So, a federal judge just unleashed one of the most blistering courtroom tirades in modern legal history after catching Donald Trump red-handed violating a direct court order. And what makes this even more explosive? Trump wasn't just bending the rules or testing boundaries. He was caught doing the exact thing the judge explicitly forbade him from doing, with evidence so clear that even his own attorneys couldn't spin their way out of it. According to multiple reporters inside the courtroom, the judge's voice rose to a level rarely heard from the bench, using words like flagrant disregard and contempt for this court's authority while Trump sat there visibly fuming. This isn't just another legal setback or a procedural dispute. We're talking about a sitting judge publicly declaring that a defendant showed deliberate defiance of a court order, and trust me, when federal judges start using language like that, you know something massive just went down. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching a former president get dressed down in open court for behavior the judge called an affront to the justice system itself. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. This case has been building for months, with Trump facing charges related to his handling of classified documents after leaving office. The judge, who was appointed to the federal bench with bipartisan support back in 2019, has been walking a tightrope, trying to give Trump every courtesy afforded to any defendant while also maintaining control of her courtroom. She issued a protective order early in the case, specifically prohibiting Trump from publicly discussing certain evidence, witnesses, or details about the case that could taint the jury pool or endanger witnesses. According to Politico's December 8th report, that order was crystal clear. It laid out in explicit terms what Trump could and couldn't say, and Trump's attorneys signed off on it, acknowledging they understood the restrictions. For weeks, Trump mostly complied, though he pushed right up against the boundaries with posts on Truth Social that skirted the edge of what was permissible. But here's where the rubber meets the road. On December 10th, Trump posted a series of messages that didn't just approach the line, they obliterated it. According to CNN's legal team, Trump named a confidential witness, shared details about classified evidence that was under seal, and made statements that prosecutors immediately flagged as direct violations of the protective order. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. Violating a court order isn't like breaking a campaign promise or ignoring political norms. This is the kind of thing that can land regular defendants in jail immediately, and judges take it extremely seriously because if defendants can just ignore court orders, the entire system breaks down. Here's where it gets interesting. According to multiple sources inside the courtroom, including CBS News reporters who were present, the hearing on December 12th started relatively calmly. Prosecutors presented their motion arguing Trump had violated the protective order, laying out screenshots of the Truth Social posts with timestamps showing exactly when they were made. Trump's attorneys attempted to argue that the posts were general commentary about the case, not specific violations, and that Trump had First Amendment rights to defend himself publicly. The judge listened to both sides, asked clarifying questions, and seemed to be methodically working through the arguments. Then came the moment that changed everything. According to reporters from NBC News who witnessed it, the judge pulled up the actual protective order on the courtroom screen and began reading it aloud, line by line, comparing the specific prohibitions to Trump's exact posts. The language was unmistakable. Where the order said, "shall not disclose the identity of witnesses," Trump's post had named someone by their full name. Where the order said, "shall not discuss classified materials under seal," Trump's post had described specific documents. It was so blatant, so undeniable, that the courtroom fell completely silent. Trump's lead attorney reportedly tried to interject, but the judge raised her hand and said she wasn't finished. What happened next, according to MSNBC's legal analyst who was in the courtroom, was extraordinary. The judge turned directly to Trump and said, "Mr. Trump, do you understand that when this court issues an order, it is not a suggestion? It is not a guideline for your attorneys to interpret creatively. It is a binding legal directive that you are required to follow." Her voice, multiple reporters noted, had an edge to it that hadn't been there before. She continued, "Your posts from December 10th represent a flagrant and intentional violation of this court's protective order. The evidence is not ambiguous. The violation is not debatable. You did exactly what this court explicitly forbade you from doing." Trump, according to courtroom observers, sat forward in his chair, his face reddening, but his attorneys were frantically passing him notes, clearly trying to keep him from reacting. The bombshell came when the judge addressed the question of consequences. She stated that she was holding Trump in contempt of court for violating the protective order, fining him $50,000 for each violation, totaling $250,000 for the 5 separate posts she identified. But then she went further. The judge said that if Trump violated the protective order again, she would not hesitate to impose custodial sanctions, meaning jail time. According to legal experts watching the proceedings, this was the nuclear option, a federal judge putting a former president on notice that continued violations could result in him being taken into custody. The judge explained that she had given Trump every benefit of the doubt, that she had crafted the protective order with his unique position in mind, and that she had been patient with boundary testing behavior up until now. But she said that this clear violation left her no choice but to impose meaningful sanctions to protect the integrity of the proceedings. This testimony sent shockwaves through the courtroom because it wasn't just about fines or procedural slaps on the wrist. This was a federal judge essentially saying that Trump's conduct was so egregious, so contemptuous of judicial authority, that incarceration was now on the table for future violations. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen Trump clash with judges over what he can say about ongoing cases. Just think about how he attacked Judge Juan Merchan during the New York trial, posting about the judge's daughter, making claims about bias, and violating gag orders so many times that the court held him in contempt multiple times. Trump paid thousands in fines but kept pushing, seemingly convinced that judges wouldn't actually jail him no matter what he did. The attacks continued right through the trial, and while Trump faced financial penalties, he never faced the threat of custody that would have silenced any other defendant immediately. Then there was Judge Tanya Chutkan in the January 6 case, who issued a gag order after Trump attacked prosecutors and potential witnesses on social media. Trump's attorneys fought the gag order all the way up through appeals, and while they got some modifications, the core restrictions remained. Trump violated those restrictions too, forcing the judge to hold hearings and impose additional penalties. The pattern was clear. Trump would test every boundary, violate orders when he thought he could get away with it, and dare judges to actually impose serious consequences. And let's not forget Judge Arthur Engoron in the New York civil fraud trial, who fined Trump repeatedly for attacks on court staff, specifically the judge's law clerk. Trump posted a photo of her on social media with false claims about her political affiliations, leading to immediate sanctions and a strict gag order. Even after being fined, Trump made comments that came close to violating the order again, showing a consistent pattern of believing the rules simply didn't apply to him in the way they applied to everyone else. Even Judge Aileen Cannon, who has been viewed as sympathetic to Trump in the classified documents case, issued warnings about improper public statements, though she's been far more lenient than other judges. But across all these cases, the pattern has been the same. Trump pushes boundaries, gets warned, pays fines, and keeps doing it because the ultimate sanction, jail time, has never actually been imposed. Now, it looks like Trump's strategy of daring judges to hold him accountable might have finally met a judge who's willing to follow through. This pattern is unmistakable. Trump treats court orders as suggestions, gambles that his status protects him from real consequences, and only stops when forced to by sanctions that actually hurt. So what specifically did the judge say that made this explosion so significant? Let's break it down. According to reporters from multiple outlets who were present, the judge's language escalated throughout her ruling. She began by methodically laying out the facts, the order that was issued, the posts that Trump made, and the clear violations that occurred. But then her tone shifted. The judge said, and this is based on reporting from the Washington Post, "This court will not be a rubber stamp for the defendant's whims. When this court issues an order, it expects compliance, not creative interpretation, not boundary testing, but full and complete compliance." That language is significant because it directly calls out the pattern of behavior Trump has displayed across multiple cases. Now, here's the kicker. The judge went even further, stating that Trump's violations weren't just about ignoring rules, they endangered witnesses and threatened the integrity of the trial. She noted that the witness Trump named had already received threats after being publicly identified in court filings, and that Trump's decision to amplify that identification on social media with millions of followers showed a reckless disregard for that individual's safety and well-being. Legal experts told CNN that this language transforms the violation from a technical infraction into something far more serious. It's not just about Trump's rights versus court authority. It's about witness safety and obstruction of justice. This leaves Trump's legal team in an extraordinarily difficult position. On one side, they need to control their client, which has proven essentially impossible throughout all of his legal cases. Trump has repeatedly ignored his attorney's advice about what to say publicly, posted things they explicitly told him not to post, and undermined their legal strategies with his own commentary. Every attorney who has represented Trump has faced this same challenge. How do you defend someone who actively sabotages his own defense? That makes it nearly impossible to mount an effective legal strategy when your client keeps creating new problems. On the flip side, they have to somehow argue to appellate courts that the contempt finding and sanctions were too harsh, but that's extraordinarily difficult when the violations are so clear and well documented. Trump's posts are time-stamped, archived, and impossible to deny. The protective order language is explicit. There's no ambiguity for appeals courts to seize on, no gray area that might suggest the judge overreached. The tricky part is that every legal option available requires Trump to actually stop violating court orders, and based on his history, that seems unlikely. So Trump's attorneys are caught in a bind. They can either try to rein in their client, which means having confrontations with someone who doesn't take direction well and who might fire them for being too controlling, or they can continue trying to clean up messes after Trump creates them, which means constantly being in reactive mode, filing emergency motions, and watching their legal strategies collapse under the weight of their client's behavior. It's a situation with no good path forward, and the judge's threat of jail time has only raised the stakes for everyone involved. Legal and political analysts are noting that this ruling represents a potential turning point in how the justice system handles Trump's conduct. Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and veteran prosecutor, appeared on MSNBC and said this was the first time a judge had put Trump on clear notice that incarceration was a realistic consequence for continued violations. He noted that, up until now, Trump has operated under the assumption that his status as a former president gave him immunity from the harshest sanctions, but this judge signaled that assumption is wrong. Former federal prosecutor Preet Bharara added on his podcast that the $250,000 fine, while significant, is less important than the threat of custody. He explained that wealthy defendants don't change behavior based on fines, even large ones, but the prospect of actually going to jail focuses minds in a way nothing else does. Even Jonathan Turley, the George Washington University law professor who has often defended Trump's legal positions, told Fox News that the judge's ruling was legally sound and that Trump's attorneys should be deeply concerned. He noted that the violations were so clear that an appeal would be very difficult and that Trump needed to understand that continued defiance could result in him being jailed during the trial. When someone who generally supports Trump's legal arguments is saying the judge got this right, that's significant. It means there's really no credible legal defense for what Trump did, and the sanctions imposed are well within the judge's authority. So, let's break down what this could mean, because it's not just about one contempt ruling or a $250,000 fine. It has serious consequences for Trump's legal strategy, his political standing, and the broader question of accountability. First, the immediate impact on the trial itself. Trump now knows that further violations will result in jail time, not just fines. This creates real pressure on him to comply, though whether he actually will remains to be seen. His attorneys are undoubtedly having emergency meetings about how to keep him from posting anything that could trigger the judge's threat. But compliance requires self-control, which hasn't been Trump's strong suit. Every day he has to restrain himself from responding to developments, from attacking witnesses, from sharing information he thinks helps his case. That's a day where he's fighting his own instincts. Second, this ruling gives prosecutors powerful ammunition. Every time Trump's attorneys argue he's being treated unfairly or that restrictions on him are too harsh, prosecutors can point to this contempt finding as proof that Trump won't comply with reasonable restrictions. It undermines defense arguments about Trump's intentions or his respect for the legal process. The documented pattern of violations becomes part of the record that follows him through every subsequent hearing and motion. Third, this has immediate political implications because it's harder to claim you're a victim of a rigged system when you've been held in contempt for violating clear court orders. Trump's narrative has always been that he's being persecuted, that the cases are political, that judges are biased against him. But when you're caught violating explicit orders and a judge has to threaten you with jail, that narrative becomes more difficult to sell to anyone outside the most committed base. Moderate voters, independents, and even some Republicans who were giving Trump the benefit of the doubt now see documented proof that he deliberately defied a court order. Looking ahead to the broader legal implications, this ruling sets a precedent that other judges can cite. Judge Chutkan in the January 6th case, Judge Merchant in New York, any judge handling Trump-related matters now has a clear example of another federal judge imposing serious sanctions and threatening custody for violations. That makes it easier for other judges to do the same, because they can point to this ruling and say they're following established precedent. It creates a legal framework that says Trump's status as a former president doesn't exempt him from the same consequences other defendants would face. But beyond Trump's individual cases, this is about whether the judicial system can maintain its authority when defendants have massive platforms and political followings. If Trump had continued violating orders without meaningful consequences, it would have sent a message that judges are powerless to control defendants who have enough public support. This ruling pushes back against that notion, reasserting that court orders mean something regardless of who the defendant is or how many followers they have on social media. This whole scenario is causing significant tension throughout the legal and political world. According to Politico, Trump's inner circle is divided on how to handle this. Some advisors are urging complete compliance, arguing that getting jailed would be politically disastrous and would make Trump look weak and out of control. They're pushing for a disciplined approach where Trump stays completely silent about case details and focuses only on broad political messaging. But other Trump allies are taking the opposite position, arguing that the judge is engaging in judicial overreach and that Trump should fight back hard, even if it means risking jail. Steve Bannon went on his podcast and called the ruling an example of judicial tyranny, urging Trump to continue speaking out because, in Bannon's view, political speech trumps judicial orders. This faction believes that Trump getting jailed would actually help him politically, turning him into a martyr and energizing his base even more. Meanwhile, legal experts across the spectrum are watching this with a mix of fascination and concern. Some see it as the system finally working, holding a powerful defendant accountable the way any other defendant would be held accountable. Others worry about what happens if Trump does violate the order again and the judge has to follow through on the threat of custody, because jailing a former president would be unprecedented and could trigger a political crisis. Things became even more intense when Trump posted on Truth Social hours after the hearing, not violating the protective order but coming right up to the line with comments about how he's being silenced and persecuted by a rigged system. Legal analysts immediately noted that Trump was testing the boundaries again, seeing how far he could go without triggering another contempt citation. It's the same pattern that's gotten him in trouble repeatedly, but he seems unable to stop himself. It's about so much more than just one contempt ruling or one defendant's behavior. It's about whether our legal system can enforce its own rules when defendants have the power, resources, and platform to defy them. If judges can't make their orders stick, if defendants can violate protective orders and face no real consequences beyond fines they can easily pay, then court authority becomes meaningless. This ruling says that authority still means something, that defiance carries consequences, and that no defendant, regardless of their former position or current influence, is above the rules that apply to everyone else. The question facing us now is whether this moment represents a real turning point or just another temporary escalation in an ongoing pattern. Will Trump actually comply with the protective order now that jail is on the table, or will he gamble that the judge won't actually follow through? Will other judges feel emboldened to impose similar sanctions, or will this remain an isolated instance? And will the public see this as evidence of a fair system holding everyone accountable, or as more proof of what Trump claims as persecution? So, here's the deal. A federal judge just held Donald Trump in contempt of court for blatantly violating a protective order, fined him $250,000, and explicitly threatened him with jail time if he does it again. This isn't just about one bad post or a misunderstanding of court rules. It's about a documented pattern of a defendant believing he's above the law and a judge finally drawing a line that comes with real consequences. When a federal judge tells you the next violation means custody, and you've just been caught in such a clear violation that even your own attorneys can't defend it, we've entered genuinely unprecedented territory for a former president. If Trump faces no ultimate accountability for continued defiance, if the threat of jail remains just a threat that's never enforced, then we're saying that some people really are above the rules that govern everyone else. So keep an eye on this.